All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So my name is Amy Frame, and I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the 10 Strands. And one of the most exciting things that I get to do in my work is to support the California Environmental Literacy Initiative. And we do a wide range of things. But sorry, I'm hearing someone who is mute. Sorry, got distracted. Okay, and so it has been our task over time to help the state implement its blueprint for environmental literacy, and we work through a number of innovation hubs. And this webinar series is put together by the County Office of Education Innovation Hub. And go ahead to the next slide. Sorry, folks, I'm distracted by the noise. All right. So our agenda for today is that we are going to back one slide. Our agenda for today is that we are going to introduce a theory of change to transform education in the state of California and beyond. We'll make the case for why county offices of education are such a valuable player in transforming schools. And then we'll introduce the two case studies that we've written to you guys, and we have a number of people here that have been involved with that'll be presenting to you today. We'll share some of our key findings from each of those case studies, and then spend a good amount of time at the end of this describing how you might be able to get involved, regardless of where you fit into the educational system. Next slide. So we have 4 of the case studies authors here, myself, Andrea from San Mateo, Katie from Orange County, and Nama from Berkeley. And then next slide. We are also very excited to have with us a number of the contributors to this case study. So we have Nancy McGee, the superintendent of San Mateo County Office of Education, and Darren Marcus, who works as the STEM coordinator and also does work with career technical education. Then we have Yuri. I don't know if he has an animal with him today or not, but I thought that was an amazing picture there, who is the outreach coordinator for Inside the Outdoors, and Holly Steele, an administrator in Orange County Department of Education, who works with STEM, Inside the Outdoors, as well as expanded learning. Next slide. So I told you a little bit about who we are, but we would definitely love to know who you are too. So if you could go ahead and let us know who is here by answering this poll, that would be super exciting. Can you guys see the results? Oh, you cannot see the results? Boring. Here you go. How about now? Can you see the results? Yes. Okay, great. So it looks like we have quite a few people here from county offices of ed and school districts, some community-based partners, and lots of classroom teachers here as well. So we're really excited to welcome you all to find out more about the role of county offices of ed in promoting environmental literacy in our school system. Next slide. Next slide. All right. So I'm going to actually go ahead and pass it over right now to our state's first environmental literacy coordinator at a county office of education. And that's Andrea Campbell from San Mateo County Office of Education. So you tell us, Andrea, what supportive context is already in place for environmental literacy, sustainability, and climate resilience in K-12 schools?
Yeah, great. Thanks. Well, it's wonderful to be here and appreciate so many different stakeholders joining us for this webinar. So Katie, if you go to the next slide, I can share a little bit about the fact that we are in a pretty supportive context here in California. So first of all, we have a state superintendent who understands the connection between environmental literacy and equity and sees value in this work. And that's coming on the heels of having a state superintendent who really valued this work as well. So if you can go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit more about that kind of past history. So California created this blueprint for environmental literacy in 2015, and that was a big stakeholder group from all over the place, all over the state of California, different roles, put together this blueprint for environmental literacy, saying like, this is what we need to see happen in our school system to ensure that every student has access to environmental literacy. So if you go to the next slide, it'll actually show a picture of what that looks like from the blueprint. That the goal of this blueprint in 2015 was to go from this illustration of having just a couple students in our state have access to environmental literacy to all students in our state. So since that blueprint was written, we've gotten a new superintendent, but like I said, Tony Thurman is also really invested in this and sees that this work is important. So we're in this important statewide context of having that. If you go one more slide further, we'll also share that we have actual principles and concepts that are meant to be embedded in all of the different subject area frameworks. So currently these environmental principles and concepts are already embedded in the science framework and the health framework and history, social studies, and visual performing arts, and they're coming up and being put into math and also ELA. So the idea is that these principles and concepts should be taught in every single subject area and at every single grade level. So again, back to that supportive context, we've got state leadership who believes in this. We have a blueprint for it. We've got standards and principles for it. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that these standards and principles aren't just at the basis of just the environment, but also really emphasize important topics like climate change and environmental justice. And that work of embedding climate change and environmental justice into those principles and concepts is now also built into Ed Code, which happened in 2018. So we had that. The environmental principles and concepts were actually done around 2013, 2003, 2004, but embedded in the frameworks by 2013, 14. Then we have them built into Ed Code by 2018. We had that blueprint in 2015. And if you go to the next slide, there's actually like a slew of other mandates and policies and things that are relevant. Oh yeah, there you go. Thank you. That are relevant to facilities. So there's a lot of policies and guidelines that are needed for facilities and operations to do things like reducing greenhouse gas emissions and going zero waste and conserving water, in addition to the curriculum and instruction things that I mentioned. And also there's visionary guidelines that we have in the state of California. So we're in a really supportive context for doing this work. So I just wanted to start off there. And then in the chat box, we have a little question for you to make this a bit more interactive. If you go to the next slide, the question is, what about this supportive context is most interesting to you or most relevant to your role? So maybe if you're a classroom teacher, the thing that might be most relevant is this idea that there's principles and concepts. Maybe if you're somebody at the district level working in facilities, it might be like, oh, there's mandates and policies for me to be doing this work in my facilities and operations. So please share in the chat box just so we could get a better sense of what from that feels really relevant to you. And then we'll go a little further as people are putting that in the chat box and just share that we really need county offices to be involved in this work. And that's because county offices can be a real big catalyst for change. So Katie, if you go to the next slide, that'll move us into this next segment. So why and how can county offices of education be a catalyst for moving forward all this supportive context and really making sure that every student gets access to this at every grade level? So if you go to the next slide, we'll just start by saying that California is a really big system. So we've got 6.2 million kids, 300,000 teachers, over 10,000 schools, and over 1,000 districts. So that's a lot of different layers. And when you look at all that and you see that there's 58 county offices, you might think, okay, well, that's the smallest number. So let's make some investment there. But not only is it the smallest number and therefore much easier to invest in, the county offices play this incredibly supportive role for all of the districts and schools and teachers and students that are embedded within their region. Really kind of like a backbone support to all of this that happens across our state. So we see it as really critical that county offices are paying attention to sustainability and climate resiliency and environmental literacy, and that they're able to bring this towards their school districts. So if you go to the next slide, we can just share a little bit more about that. Typically, county offices play quite a few different roles for schools in their districts, like they're an intermediary between the state and the LEAs. They support LEAs, they instruct special populations, they offer technical support, develop the education workforce, and also lead high impact countywide initiatives. So the work that we're going to talk about today sits most clearly in number 6 in leading high impact countywide initiatives, but it also touches on every single one of those other things because this work of environmental literacy and sustainability and climate resiliency is so broad. And we'll talk about that as we go a little further. But go ahead and go to the next slide, Katie, and we'll talk a little bit about like what is the outcome of doing an environmental literacy initiative and what is that vision? So we've talked about this a lot in our County Office of Education Innovation Hub, and we've agreed that we see the outcome of this idea to be that K-12 schools would be models of sustainability and climate resiliency, and that we would graduate all students every year who are environmentally and climate literate. And you can see in this little picture, if you're able to see your screen, that there's a lot of different things in this picture that would make you think about environmental sustainability or climate resiliency or kids doing interactive learning that really has them connected to the environment. So there's solar panels, there's wind turbines, there's gardens, there's kids interacting with those gardens, there's rain barrels, there's public transportations, there's tri-bin way stations. All these things is what we have as a vision for our schools. So if you go to the next slide, we can say that it might be obvious from that picture, but I'll go a little further on this. Our COE Innovation Hub feels really strongly that this work takes place across all aspects of schools. So you see it show up in the campus, in the curriculum, in the community and culture, and that we're really trying to work with all the different stakeholders. And that's why that kind of brings it back to why a County Office of Education can be so critical for this, is that we have an eye for looking at all these different things and supporting our districts and schools to really make sure that every student has equitable access to these outcomes. So if we go to the next slide, I can also say that for doing this work, one other reason to have it be led through county offices is that research across the United States shows that district investment in sustainability coordinators is so far correlated with the size of the district. And in California, we have 60% of our schools in our school districts are small or very small. And so we know that right now, those small or very small school districts really rely a lot on support from their county offices of ed. And so when a county office of ed is leading an initiative like this, then those school districts can really get that support that they need. We also know that large urban and suburban school districts are starting to invest in having sustainability coordinators, but that our smaller and medium-sized school districts are not quite there yet. And so that's why we're saying, like, let's have this really be supported from these county office agencies who can help to catalyze that work in the districts and move it forward. Next slide. So one thing that we will be sharing today, because we're going to show 2 different county offices approach, is that many COEs are starting to see this implementing this change across their COE and across their county region happening in a pretty general implementation stages. So when you launch an initiative of this nature, it's a change-based initiative. And so you're really bringing change. And that means getting people to buy into it. It means identifying emerging efforts. And then as people kind of move past the buy-in stage, really helping schools and districts assess and plan and start to strategically implement this work. And then the last thing I would say in this phase is that we're starting to even see some county offices of ed and some school districts are really at the place now of doing systemic sustainable implementation. So we're going to share a little bit today about 2 county offices that are at different stages of this and what the journey has been to get there and kind of where things are at now that we've after, I guess, I don't know how many months it's been since we finished these case studies, but now that we're kind of a year later from the interviews. So I think that's it for me doing the introduction of just like this idea of the theory of change. And I'll turn it back over to you, Amy, to talk about the case studies themselves.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. So back in 2019, as this work was emerging, those of us in the County Office of Education Innovation Hub, we're getting a lot of questions and a lot of curiosity about what's happening, what's possible, how did it work? And so we decided to write those things down and collect information from a series of interviews and write those things down with the goal of helping other County Office of Ed folks and people who might work with them understand that although there's sort of a general path that emerges, this is going to be specific to each county, and we wanted to look at 2 very different parts of the state to figure out what it might look like. Next slide. So these are some of the stars of the show. On the left, we have our Orange County folks, and on the right, we have the former and current superintendent of San Mateo, who really put their leadership behind this work, and who are a great voice for the efforts. Next slide. So the purpose of listing all of these names is just to show you that what we learned from this and what we understood was it's great to have an environmental literacy coordinator, and for sure you need the support of your leadership, but there are typically many people involved in environmental literacy work at a county office of ed. So yes, it may involve a STEM coordinator or a science person, but what we've seen in both of these cases is once that gets going, it really expands into lots of community-based partnerships and lots of different departments within the county office of ed. And if you go to next slide, we also had an important thought partner in this research, Nama Sadan, who's a researcher from UC Berkeley. And I was wondering if you wanted to share a few words about, you know, just what is a case study and what is the value of using a case study to learn.
Sure. Yeah, so we used a case study and we did a comparative case study. So there are two case studies really in this report that was shared, I guess, with everyone, or will be shared with everyone. And a case study basically is an in-depth, detailed examination of a particular case within a real-world context. And it's an intensive study about a person, a group of people, a unit, but it's always aimed at to generalize over several units, or to take the understanding of what's happening in reality and understand from its principles and some kind of like a structure that can help us guide the work in other places. And really, I think that the value of doing a case study in this case is that we all know already that sustainability is so dependent on local factors. So you can't just go from theory and just say, oh, that's the thing that's going to work for everyone. You have to learn from the complexities and the specific factors of different regions and different locales, how these things are emerging and how they are working. And I think that it was very evident in the case study that we did that there are so many components, and to understand how they connect to each other and how change happens, who are the actors that are involved, what are the different conditions that allow them to really push it forward. We saw that these things can look different, and at the same time, we can generalize some things about the process that they're going through that can support others. I think that choosing also to do a case study, especially a comparative case study, allows us also to support diversity and equity in that regard, that different locales and different counties have different resources, have different environmental problems, and have different community-based partner options. And by having the opportunity to look at two different case studies, I think a lot of counties can relate and find the way to really support themselves in this process.
Thank you so much. Next slide. All right, so we're going to begin by talking about San Mateo County Office of Education. And yep, sure, go to the next slide. So after analysis of the kind that Nama was describing, we realized that San Mateo really was at the highest level we know of systemic and sustainable implementation of their efforts. Next slide. We found that out by not just triangulating, but compiling and making sense of the data from all of these different interviewees, many of whom are here today. Next slide. And I'll let Andrea tell the story from her point of view as well. But what I think was really striking for me is that the former superintendent of San Mateo, Andrea Campbell, just shared with me the story of how once she saw teachers in a professional learning experience that she got to witness, and after working with Andrea over time, she said, I just came to the conclusion that for me, it was non-negotiable. And when you think about the issues around climate change, environmental justice, and quality of life in our communities, I really understand and value her perspective that of all the competing priorities that I know you guys in the education system face, this one is one that we can't let go of. Next slide. And so with that, I wanted to go ahead and pass it off to the person who really showed me what a broader framework would look like to take environmental literacy and put it in the perspective of lots of other important things that are going on in counties, districts, and schools. So take it away, Andrea.
Yeah, great. Sure. So I'll share a little bit about a couple of just high level things. But first, I just want to say, like, I am forever grateful as a mother and an educator to Ann Campbell for taking a risk and saying, like, we're going to do this initiative. And even more grateful to current County Superintendent Nancy McGee for saying, like, as she took over that role, to say, like, yeah, let's double down on this effort. So I'm just super grateful to have leaders that I've been able to work with who understand the importance and the value. And I said that as an educator because it was so important to me as an educator and a teacher in the classroom to do this work and to bring it into my curriculum. And it's wonderful to be in a supportive context where that you don't have to fight to do that. And then the other thing, as a mother having children, it's just so nice to know that people do care about my children's future and are trying to make a difference. So thank you to all the leadership that's doing that. And now, Katie, if you go to the next slide, I'll just share really quickly about our context. So San Mateo County sits between San Francisco County and Santa Clara County. So we're right in the heart of Silicon Valley. And we are supporting 23 different school districts in our county. And if you go to the next slide, I'll share a little bit more about that. We launched this effort in 2017, and our goal has been and continues to be to provide backbone support to our school districts in prioritizing environmental literacy, but also preparing leaders to integrate environmental sustainability and climate resiliency across the campus, curriculum, community, and culture. And if you go to the next slide, it'll show you a little bit more close up that framework that I mentioned before. So we really, when I came to the county and brought this framework, I was really hopeful to take work that I had done at the site level of doing this across a whole school and really have this vision for all of the schools in our county to be doing this work across their whole school. So currently, some of our strategic goals alongside this framework are to have every district have a baseline assessment and a plan, and that they're implementing that plan to move towards this sustainable and climate resilient efforts. And then, of course, our other goal is to have every student graduate environmentally literate. So that's the framework that we use. And that's the mission that we use. And then I'll just share one more thing here on the next slide, which is to say that, like, because we were the first county office to do this, we really had to think about, well, what's our theory of action for actually bringing all this to fruition? So for us, we really thought about that we needed to have capacity building programs, but also networks. So our capacity building programs are really to develop leaders in our field and within our region. And then our networks were there to really connect all these different leaders and different folks in schools and in districts to different partnerships that they could have, but also to each other so they could share best practices. And then we also implemented an annual summit that we've been doing for the last couple of years, and a recognition program to really celebrate some of those leaders. And then as we got further along in our initiative in years 3, 4, and 5, we were able to really launch much more robust, comprehensive technical assistance. So definitely in the realms of facilities and operations, but also for climate literacy in the curriculum and environmental literacy, and then helping our schools start to think about, as climate change has become ever more present in our county and across California, to really think about how to do climate ready adaptations in their facilities and also in their school-based programs to deal with the trauma of climate change. So those are some of the things that we put in place as our theory of action. And I can say, and I know it's in the case studies, but I'll just, if you go to the next slide, I'll say, like, we feel really confident that 5 years later, the initiative has become a movement and it's really spreading across our county. And there's a number of districts that have really engaged with the work. All of them are engaged on some level, but there are a number of districts who have really engaged and are starting to see themselves as local and statewide leaders, doing things like applying for green ribbon, moving well past the buy-in phase and doing assessments and implementation. And a couple are kind of bordering on this idea of actual, like, implementing district-wide sustainability committees that are moving forward projects and programs. So it's exciting to see, like, that theory of action, like, come to fruition and really see that start to take off across our county. So that's all from my perspective, but we have other folks from my county office who can also share. So I'll be silent now and turn it over to them. And I don't know, Amy, do you want to do the question asking?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing that epic tale. And Nancy, this question is for you. You know, you posed a question in the interview that really resonated for all of us as we were thinking about these case studies, which was just, you know, uh, what is the role of the County Office of Education in leveling the playing field? And what role can environmental literacy and sustainability play in this process? I know that equity was really important to you all along. And I'm just wondering, from your point of view, what else you've learned since this interview about the role of county offices of education in leading this work.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. And I'm really happy to be here. Really great to see so many people across the state here today on the call. Shout out obviously to Ann Campbell for her vision, and probably the best thing she did was to hire Andrea, who's just been a complete passionate hero for the work, and developed such a framework of such a foundation to do the work from so many angles. Having said that, and knowing that the question is about the county office, I know that not everybody on the call comes from a county office. Like there may be a single classroom teacher listening in. Like, I don't want people to think that you have to wait for your county office of education to do something in this space. Like everybody has their sphere of influence. And at one point I was a high school English teacher. We could have conversations, debates, research projects, you know, pick our reading materials. I was a high school librarian. We beefed up our, you know, contemporary science nonfiction collection. So there's things that each one of us can do right this minute, and we don't have to wait for our counties. But having said that, I think the county office is the right lever to really grow the work from within. Think of it as, you know, you've got a whole, yeah, like the human body has all these different areas and sections and organs. And when each one of those systems in your body is healthy and functioning, you have a healthy, vibrant human being. And I think that's kind of what I would relate, is that the county offices are like each one sort of an organ for the state, like a system for the state of California. And when each one of them is highly functioning in a particular way, we make for a stronger system of education for all kids. In the equity space, I would say we learned so much. I mean, I'm in my 4th year of being the county superintendent, and 2 of them have been in COVID. And so COVID really showed us that the inequities that are showing up here, you know, that I reference here in my quote, were really glaring, like to the point of, are people going to have food tomorrow? Are they going to have a digital device in order to access their education? Do they have anybody checking on them when we're all in, you know, remote learning and shelter in place? So all those vulnerabilities really exacerbated. And what we were able to do at the county office was be this central sort of call-in line. We need help, we need this, we need that. And we were able to start to learn all those different pockets and really target our resources into those spaces. We were also able to really have a conversation about the importance of meeting the needs of those districts that really don't have the resources and don't have the capacity to do the work, but have the will and the desire to do it. Versus, so we have some big districts in our county that are kind of more like machines, and they have lots and lots of people. And so I think in that space, if you're at a county office, you want to partner with your larger districts that have capacity to do the work together, and in order to lift up the other spaces that maybe don't have the resources. And then one other thing I'll say is just the County Office of Education is a player in your political landscape of your county. So if you can, it's a place where you can connect to your health and human services, to your behavioral health departments, to your juvenile justice systems, to your board of supervisors. And these things around green careers, these ideas around green careers, environmental justice issues, these are things that these other agencies also care about and want to lean into. So, you have the ability to really join forces with larger political entities and even have a more common and a louder voice in the space. So there's all kinds of richness there to launch from the county office.
Thank you so much for painting that picture for us about all the ways that a county office can work in a community. And speaking of career education, next slide. We also have with us Darren Marcus, who is a STEM coordinator and has the goal of greening all of the industry sectors, but is working on that for now, largely through his work with younger students and trying to just bring awareness to green careers, period. So for you, Darren, what have you learned lately about integrating environmental literacy into career awareness, and what are some of the things that you plan on doing in the future to further that work?
Okay, hi everyone, and thank you for that, and thank you for inviting me to this. I just want to say that there are great benefits to having to sharing your physical office space with the state's first environmental literacy coordinator, and she's had an incredible impact not just on me and my work, but on basically everybody that I know in the county office. So, you know, in my role, which is career technical education, science and engineering, health and computer science, environmental literacy is like become the thread for everything. And in our college and career readiness team, we believe that like all jobs are green jobs, and we need to prepare our students for the green workforce, which means more environmental literacy, sustainability education, more career education at all grade levels, not just in the career technical education classes at the high school. So toward the beginning, when I kind of moved into my current position as CT coordinator, Andrea's environmental literacy team and our team worked together to produce, I'm going to put this in the chat box for you. Andrea, sorry, I didn't tell you I was going to do this first, but it's the Green Economy Overview for K-12 educators. I've seen this being referenced in many other places. I'm really happy to see this being shared out, but this really helped frame my work around coming into the CTE world and thinking about the industry sectors. And as you scroll down, you'll see the way we structured this document is by industry sector, which is California's 15 industry sectors, and which basically encompass the CTE pathways, and really starting to think about the green workforce and how to transform every one of these green industry sectors and the career pathways that go along with them to become more focused on environmental sustainability and their practices. And we're trying to do that in many different content areas. So what came out of that work was us applying for a strong workforce grant where we created the Green Career Awareness modules and our and I'm putting that in the chat box too. So this is something that we've rolled out in several of our middle school districts. We have four districts now that are part of our program, and at least 3 more coming on in the fall. So we've designed a new elective course and a bunch of individual modules all around green career awareness. So it serves kind of 2 purposes. One is to introduce more environmental literacy into middle schools, but it's also introducing career education, specifically green career education, into our middle schools as well. And we keep hearing more and more from middle schools that they want to beef up their programs and they want more career education. So believe me, if I'm bringing career education to middle schools, we're bringing green career education. Another thing that I brought to the California Science Educators case is the need to integrate NGSS and career education. And a result of that, we have a new committee at that level that's integrating NGSS and career education, for which I co-chair. I also co-chair the Green Career Innovation Hub from Cali. Andrea runs this great program, Environmental and Climate Justice Teacher Fellowship Cohort, which it's now I believe in our 7th year. And this year things are going to be a little bit different, but one of the new aspects of this summer's work is to work with CTE teachers alongside coaches, our industry partners, community-based partners, and curriculum developers to help teachers revamp their instructional units to include information about the ways that industry sectors are taking on new sustainable practices and behaviors. So really that gives them an opportunity to revamp their own work and implement that in the classroom. So we're very, very excited about that. And just a little bit more, we've been working with other county offices like Santa Clara, San Diego, and their Green Innovation Initiative. See Nate Ivy's on the call here, working with the Fremont School District, and really getting a sense of the landscape and finding new partners to work with to really build new programs. With our Cali group, we are starting to work on a document that we're hoping that will be tailored for superintendents and industry partners called the Roadmap to a Green Economy for K-14 Educators. Presenting at conferences and really trying to get the word out about green career education and the need to start that work in much, much earlier grades. So there's a lot going on, obviously, in the county office. I've left out several things, but I wanted to make sure we have time for everybody. So thank you to Callie and to 10 Strands for really heading up this work. If anybody's interested in green career education, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'll put my email address in the chat box, and thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Next slide. So if you have questions for any of these speakers, for Nancy, for Andrew, or Darren, I'm actually not going to pause now. I'd love for you to put them in the chat box and we will make sure that you get your answer. But I do want to make sure that you hear from Orange County as well. Next slide. So Orange County Department of Education, they're an Office of Education, but they call themselves a Department of Education. I don't know the story behind that. But they're a group that is sort of also a master of partnerships, but they have a little bit of a different story to tell about how they got to stage 3, where they're assessing, planning, and doing their strategic implementation. Next piece. So these are the people that were interviewed here. We have a couple of them here to talk with you today. Next slide. So what I first heard about Orange County was really this emphasis on outdoor learning, and there's been a strong culture in the county and a lot of the districts within the county for many years of making sure that students really got access to outdoor education and going to camp and other field trips and things like that. And a lot of so in Orange County as well, there's support from the superintendent. He has a blog that he wrote for 10 Strands that I'll put in the chat in a second. Next slide. And I came to this work through, at this point, you want me to pass it over to you, Katie? I'm going to pass this over to Katie.
Sure. Sorry, I think we put these in the wrong spots. I apologize on that one.
I'll let you tell the story. This is Katie Beck,
Sure.
a STEM coordinator at Orange County Department of Education, who's going to tell her story, and then we'll hear from a couple of other folks that we interviewed.
I apologize, everybody. This slide was supposed to be like 2 down from this, so just got a little jumbled. To give you a little bit of context about Orange County, we actually are the 3rd most populous county in California and the 6th most populous in the country. And most people don't know that about us. We service over 500,000 students, and we are situated in between LA and San Diego, who are larger than us. So we look small in comparison, but we are also mighty. And really to kind of start our work, actually, I wish she was here. She is our Batman. I am just Robin. She's the one who really kind of spearheaded all of this and really kind of got the ball rolling for us. Her name is Lori Kieser, and she works with Inside the Outdoors. And kind of to explain Inside the Outdoors to you, it's a foundation, but yet they're also a part of our county office, and they've been around since 1974. And really, they are the backbone to our environmental literacy. And as Amy alluded to, they're an organization that provides outdoor experiences for students in our county. And over the years since 1974, I think it's been like about 3.5 million kids that they've been able to give experiences to. And so Lori, a while ago, when that blueprint came out, she really started reading this, and it really kind of validated all of the things that Inside the Outdoors has been doing since 1974, and was thinking, oh my goodness, how are we going to start to take some of those experiences and take that validation and start to move this work forward more from like a bottom up approach. So really that grassroots, like we've impacted these students. So how are we going to be able to start to impact our teachers and our schools, and ultimately everything around the county? Because we're so large, it is hard to do stuff that's top down. And really we have to find those champions where we can throughout our county. This is me. You don't need to read that one. Never mind. We'll move on to more exciting things. One of the things when Lori and I sat down and really started to do work together and started to do work with Cali and with 10 Strands and other organizations out there, we really wanted to start to look for what initiatives do we have in our county? What are the things that we are promoting? What are the things that we work with? And the big one for us in Orange County is the California multi-tiered system of support. So really looking at the whole child when we're trying to educate our children. So that means not just our academics, but really what are the social emotional needs of our kiddos? What are the behavioral needs of our kiddos? And really who are we bringing to the table when we start to think about educating a child? And then we started thinking, oh my gosh, well, wait a second. It's not just who we're bringing to the table. It's like, what experiences are we bringing to the table? And we really found that environmental literacy is that core competency that is starting to bring all of that. So it's not just looking at a kid and understanding the environmental principles and concepts, but it's also how are we getting our communities involved? How are we educating our parents? How are we bringing in industry and really making those partnerships together so that kids can see their place and space in their community? In doing that, we also really wanted to start to understand that equity and access within our county. It is a very diverse county, both socioeconomically and also in ability to have green spaces. So we wanted to understand really what the needs of that community were, and understanding that every bit is a little bit different, and we're going to have to start to actually listen, and not just listen to listen, like really understand what are those needs, who are the voices in that community that are valued, who are the voices in that community that need to be risen up, that we need to help to promote. And so what are those partnerships and how can we bring them in? And in doing that, we know that this really does have to be hyper-local. So wanting to make those connections, not just with the kids, bringing kids out onto field trips, but but then bringing their parents out on those same field trips as well. So how are we making the connection at the family level? How are we making the connections with our districts at this? And to do that, we know that we start to have our own internal champions and these people who are helping to make all of this work. But we also know that since ITO is really this backbone of environmental literacy, and with kiddos, we need to start to have these internal champions within our districts as well. So we have found those districts that really want to buy into this and are slowly but surely bringing them into the fold and trying to provide the professional development alongside with the teachers, alongside those experiences that students are having. And that's kind of where I come in to kind of help bridge some of those gaps, and also knowing that those internal champions are slowly starting to spread out, as I think a lot of people have alluded to different areas, to our health folks and to our VAPA and our history social science. So we're slowly trying to bring people in and start to do some landscape analysis around our county for what the needs are and who those next champions might be to support both their kids in the work, them in the work, and then us in the work as well. And so we can partner there. I think I ran through that as fast as I possibly could, knowing for time. So I'm going to pass that back to Amy.
All right, great. Thank you, Katie. So this next question, Holly, is for you as an administrator, actually overseeing so many different departments there. Can you tell us more about how California's supportive context that, like Andrea alluded to earlier, has supported the expansion of environmental literacy in your county office?
Yeah, thank you, Amy. And I think if we want to think of the supportive context in California, especially around our frameworks, I think there's some great conversation there. Ultimately, by definition, our frameworks are really designed to provide that guidance for implementing our state standards. And while our standards tell us the what to teach, our frameworks really tell us the how, and that makes them really influential documents to shift our collective work in a way that's aligned with the intent of our standards. And in a really exciting context, as Katie has alluded to, if we think about environmental literacy, our frameworks challenge us to weave the thread of environmental principles and concepts throughout each of the content areas that every child experiences throughout their school day. And our frameworks give us those concrete examples through our vignettes and our snapshots of what that could look like in a classroom setting. And those are great as a starting point for engaging teachers and principals and district administrators, as Katie shared, in inquiry and visioning around comprehensive environmental literacy education. This has really been the cornerstone of some of our work in our local districts and has really served as a catalyst for some really exciting and significant work by some of our eager districts of, Anaheim Elementary and Ocean View, who have made a really strong commitment to environmental literacy. And that's not only through student-facing programs, but also through educator professional learning, and all of that grounded deeply within the environmental principles and concepts. So ultimately, we think of that supportive context of our frameworks. They provide that starting point for shared inquiry, while also challenging us to sort of live up to the vision of environmental literacy as a core competency for each and every one of our students here in California.
Wow, well said. I think what I learned from talking to you all in Orange County Department of Ed is you absolutely need the formal sector's involvement, but environmental literacy absolutely requires strong partnerships with community-based organizations. And so if you go to the next slide, I wanted to introduce Yuri Deming, the outreach manager for Inside the Outdoors, who has done just incredible work in your community, and ask you, I guess, just to share a tiny bit more about what Inside the Outdoors is, and then, tell us about some ways that families and other community partners have impacted environmental literacy for kids in your county. And then any advice you have for people that maybe works out who are in the community and still want to support this work.
Sure thing, Amy. I appreciate the time. Hello, everyone. My name is Yuri with Inside the Outdoors. And I promise you there's more pictures of me besides holding an owl, even though it is my favorite animal to present with. But actually, I'm glad that you have that other picture because, in connecting with families, which is one of my favorite things to do with Inside the Outdoors, it's really about providing that feeling of environmental literacy. As Andrea mentioned, as a parent, it's very important to have these opportunities for students throughout all schools that we support. And for me, providing these experiences, this picture right here is at a meeting at a district office. So, when I get an opportunity to present with our program and I ask them, can I bring an animal? And they look at me sideways. When I bring out an owl and there's a room of principals, superintendent, administrators, and they gasp, and it's the same reaction as a group of first graders, that's the moment that I wanted to realize this is what we do. This is why we do what we do. Because everyone has that connection to the environmental literacy, from their years when they were in school as well. So families and community partners, for me, those are two of the same things, right? We always want to make sure that we're connecting with parents because usually families are the ones that are signing off on field trip experiences, transportation to get students off campus. They're supporting school gardens. They're developing clubs to recycle at school. So making sure that they're involved throughout the whole process is really how you're going to be able to move that needle. So for me, I know it's important to present at the school level for PTAs, at the district level, and even at the county level. So we have 4th District PTA, which oversees PTAs at the county level, which we've built that relationship for them to know that if they have any questions with environmental literacy and programming, they can reach out to us. Because we've been around almost 50 years, you know, we've had employees come through our programs that have participated in field trips with Inside the Outdoors as well. What I would let community partners know as far as connecting with county offices, you know, for me, relationships is probably the biggest thing in my line of work. Reach out to anyone at the county office. And if they're not able to help you, they will connect you with someone that will. We're here to serve the community. And I know for us at OCDE, we're here to serve Orange County and also surrounding counties as well, because our program does go beyond Orange County. But I love the pictures that you showed because, you know, some of the field trips, like the background that I have, which is the largest wetland in Orange County, we've also set up parent-only field trips. You know, because as parents, they attend as chaperones. A lot of times they're there to help with the management of students, but we want them to, again, have that experience. So we work with districts to set up field trips just for parents to go out and experience some of the programs that we have at Inside the Outdoors. But my thing, again, relationships is key, making sure to reach out to anyone at the county office, because I know that from our point of view at OCDE, we're here to support, you know, anyone that has these questions as far as environmental literacy. And we do work with other animals besides owls as well.
More pictures, please. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sharif. All right, next slide. So again, I want to make sure if you do have questions for our panelists, please do put those in the chat and we will get them to the right places. We're just going to close out with a super quick summary of some key findings and some more thoughts on how you might be able to get involved. Next slide. So you know, we really came to understand from these case studies that county offices of ed are really in the business of developing capacity. And those were 3 kinds of capacities that were going on at once to move through the different stages of implementation. So relationships with outside partners, relationships with districts and district leaders, and then also continuing to develop their internal capacities to work together, especially within and then across different departments and offices within county offices of education. And that only by developing those 3 would county offices really be able to take a systems approach, but that they were well situated to do that because of the expertise that they had. Next slide. So I was wondering as I went into this, you know, we see some people really emerging as strong leaders in environmental literacy in the state of California. And I was wondering, you know, is this something that's baked into the system at all? Or is it something that's teachable or trainable? Or is this just a pet project of a few people? And I think what came up for me was, you know, we have standards for administrators, just like we do for teachers, just like we do for students. When you join the profession, you're held accountable to a certain set of behaviors that count as what's professional in that field. And I'll just say that overall, we looked at the CPSLs, or the California Professional Standards for Educational Leaders, and found a huge overlap. So basically the things that the strong administrator in the formal system would do are easily applicable to what's going on. So having visionary leadership, being familiar with standards and frameworks, being a good manager of human and fiscal resources, and aligning resources from outside of the county office of ed. Next slide. Some of the, you know, one of the standards is all about like maintaining partnerships with families and communities, which you've heard the importance of today. Belonging to broader statewide organizations. I know both San Mateo and Orange County have expressed the value that they find in, you know, coming together in our innovation hub and the different meetings such as this to just hear about what's going on in other places. And we're hoping to bring more superintendents and other leaders into that space as well. And I think something I wasn't necessarily expecting to find, but, you know, the last CPSL is about like ethics and integrity. And what I heard from every person I interviewed was this deep care and concern for our children, for their health, for their safety, for their future, for wanting them to have healthy green schools and safe places to go that give them a sense of, safety and well-being. And so I think that's a strong motivating force for so many people in this work and a really compelling story. Next slide. Lastly, I think environmental literacy is based on the California frameworks and standards, and it's super important, but most everyone that we talked to didn't just stick to standards and frameworks. They understand that this environmental literacy work relates to health, well-being, school campuses, green spaces, community, and also to impact reduction, right? If kids are environmentally literate, they're going to want to reduce our environmental impacts. And so at the same time that we're working on students developing their environmental literacy, we're also learning as adults, we're also becoming more environmentally literate, so that when the students are pushing for something, we're not pushing back against them, but we're working with them to help move forward those initiatives that make schools models of climate resilience and sustainability that we know that they can and should be. I am aware of the time, but I'm going to throw it back to Katie for a few ideas about how you might get further involved in this work.
Sure, thanks, Amy. So to kind of wrap it all up, we know that we have all sorts of different folks in the room. So one thing to do is reach out to your county office. That they can certainly be somebody. If you are not a county office person, you can reach out. If you are a county office person, those folks, the ones in orange on either one of these maps are counties that are involved in the California Environmental Literacy Initiative. On the right-hand side, the map with the yellow are all of the counties that are part of our community of practice. And so we would encourage those of you who are part of a county office, if you haven't been, please register and come to our community of practice meetings. We have 2 left for this year. You can register there. We will give you a link to the slides later after this. If you are a county person, or oh my gosh, if you're a teacher and you are here with us now, we have many other opportunities coming up for other webinars. We will be doing a teacher call to action from a classroom teacher's perspective on April 7th. And then for those of us that work in a professional learning capacity, we're going to do it from that standpoint on the 21st. There is a state seal of civic engagement, and we have created an implementation guide looking at that through an environmental lens. I would highly encourage you to grab your history, social science buddies and bring them along with you. Give them a quick nudge and please tell them it is not just science, it is everybody that is doing this work, and there is safety in numbers and they need to come along for the ride. And then on June 1st, there is a community-based partner network toolkit, and really looking at how we can bring in those in our community around us to help us with the work. We have all sorts of publications that are out there. We've been doing this work for a couple of years now, and this did all start with our call to action for educational leaders. Again, for those in a county office position, if you have not read this or looked through this, was our first document and really kind of got us all going with this. And then we do have the case studies, teacher call to action, a community-based partner toolkit, and we will have that state seal guide coming out soon. So please be on the lookout. You can find all of these on the Cali website. And if you are thinking, oh my gosh, this idea of community-based partners has really been resonating with me throughout this presentation, there is a website with Green Guardians, and it is with Green Guardians and the Cali group. And there are different county offices that are on there that showcase different programs in your county. You can certainly go to that. The county offices of eds do host it, and they do vet that page. So it is not that just anybody can put their thing on there. So they are vetted. So that is a great place and space to look. Again, this is taking a little bit deeper of a dive. You can search once you're on there for cost, duration, locations, grades, really anything you can think of, you can search through that. Again, please feel free to reach out to your county office, reach out to your district. If you are a classroom teacher, ask your district, how are they involved in this? How could they start this? Do they have an environmental literacy point person or sustainability director for the district? You're also, please feel free to email us. I want to be cognizant of time and just say thank you so much from all of us. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions whatsoever. And always please look on the website for any information you want. So thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time and for you listening to us, and go out and get into some nature.
Great. Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you for our guest speakers and to the case study writers. Celeste from 10 Strands here supporting us. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. If anyone wants to stay and chat a bit, you can. Otherwise, I'm sure you have like 10 other things that you could do right now. So we super appreciate the time that you guys have spent with us here today, and see you next time.